it is very true that unfortunately European security situation is has entered a new, more dangerous era, and all of us need to tackle that somehow. This has also brought to EU enlargement process, for example, an element of geopolitics. It's a difficult issue, but I think all of us who believe in democratic values should be very vigilant at the moment and really stand up for these values, for the rules-based international order and everything that we have seen to be cornerstones of international politics. Now it's time to defend those, and I think countries like Finland and Kosovo should be at the forefront in doing so, because if we fail to defend these democratic values, then this scenario that you are mentioning, the security threats for Europe, are much more likely, and they can be much more serious. So I'm hoping that in our region we are staying true to the values, defend them, and act accordingly. And part of this process is, of course, supporting and being integrated in these international organizations, such as in the case of Finland or Kosovo, it can be NATO, European Union, Council of Europe, etc., which are really the pillars of international system.
You're recent members of NATO, but maybe the journey for Finland to be part of NATO is more easier than the case of Kosovo. Why did you decide after the aggression that this is the case that we should consider being part of NATO?
Well, NATO membership was traditionally for decades not that popular among Finnish people. Support levels were roughly around 20%, 25% at the most. But it changed dramatically a couple of years ago for quite obvious reasons. And I think the Finnish people, when they started to voice their opinions in the polls in support of NATO membership, they had maybe a couple of things on their mind. First of all, if there is an idea somewhere that sovereign nations cannot make their own foreign policy or security policy decisions, this is something that we don't want to see. All countries should be able to decide on their own. And another element is that, of course, when you see that in the middle of Europe, such an aggression, war against another European country can happen, it changed dramatically how people viewed security situation, and it led to quite a speedy process in our country of applying to become a NATO member, and then we proceeded with that, and for now, for 1 year, we have been a full member of NATO. But we always highlighted when we sort of campaigned to be a member, we highlighted what we could bring to NATO. We didn't come with problems, but we came with solutions. And solutions are that Finland is a security provider. We don't consume security provided by others, but we provide stability and peaceful way of living in our corner of Europe. And I think this was a very strong point of my political leaders when deciding to apply for membership.
Europe, or countries in Europe, mostly those eastern ones, depends on the US in the matter of security helps. So there have been talkings or issues or declarations that Europe should have its own protecting force, because maybe we're a bit dependent from the United States of America. It has been President Macron that issued this idea. Do you think that Europe should have its own force, or it should depend on NATO? And we can remember the declarations of ex-US President Donald Trump. He says that European countries should do more about NATO, should invest more about NATO. It's not always on US to protect them and to invest the most.
I think Europe needs to really be awake at this point in history, and this includes being prepared in all sectors of our societies, including defense. I think the war in Ukraine has showed that we have to have production. It can be defense material, ammunition, etc. But that is definitely and unfortunately needed in today's Europe. When a country joins NATO, it is of course evident that the minimum GDP contribution is 2% of the budget, and Finland is fulfilling that. I know that there are cases where this is still a target, but this is something that we have to take seriously, and we have to look at security in a comprehensive way. Our former president was asked by the European Commission to prepare a report on European security capabilities in a comprehensive way. Sort of what is the preparedness of Europe in several different crises, and he is now in process of preparing that, and probably some of the ideas are mirroring the Finnish policies, because we do have a concept of comprehensive security in our country, which includes civilian but also military aspects. For example, we never stopped funding our military even after the Cold War, when it was not that top of the agenda in many countries. We never stopped that. We never stopped conscription, and all those things that can be counted as elements of being prepared are now more important than in a long time. So definitely, I think Europe needs to be awake in this situation.
And maybe another question that you can or want not to respond is, what if President Trump comes into the White House again? Do you think he has some ideas about the NATO and security and supporting the war of Ukrainians? What do you think will happen? Do you think things would change under his presidency?
Well, we have this funny thing in Finland called respecting democracy and democratic processes. So whoever the American people decide to vote to White House, we will of course seek to cooperate with as closely as possible. So I will not go in more detail into that, but I'm confident that our leaders, both sides of the Atlantic, are capable of working together, and this time, in this very difficult global environment, I think this cooperation is needed much more than in many years before.
In the case of no cooperation, is Europe ready to protect itself with the changes that our countries are making?
Well, regardless of other administrations, I would say that Europe needs to be ready. And this is something that needs to be developed in a comprehensive way. There needs to be some strategic thinking in Europe. We make sure that any crisis situation would not make us incapable of deciding or acting. So it is, in my view, anyways, very high on the next Commission's agenda, which we will see after the European elections. So I think and I hope that this will be a top priority of our European leaders, regardless of anyone else.
Well, one last question about the NATO and the security. This is about Kosovo membership with NATO, or being near to NATO. What are the chances of our country to be part of NATO, taking into the consideration the situation?
Well, in a longer perspective, I definitely believe that it will be the case, and this is something that my political leaders have consistently highlighted. Finland will support all international aspirations that Kosovo has, and this includes memberships in different organizations. So I'm